Is this thing on?
Welcome to Voice Podcast, the podcast for students by students. So today I'm joined by Jessica Penner. Did I pronounce your name right? Mm-hmm. And you are a prof for one of the online courses, correct?
Yes. Of course, it's always online, not just because of COVID. Yes.
Right. It's always online. Yeah. And I took that program last year and I really liked it. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it. It's called Field to Fork, right?
Yeah. Local and global food systems as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So today I wanted to delve into this topic a little bit of food sustainability, how we can eat sustainably, how we can do that, especially as a student, and if you're on a budget and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself first, how you got into this, why you're the prof for this course, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I have been teaching this course or a variation of this course for 11 years, actually. It started as a part of a continuing education certificate program at St.LawrenceCollege in sustainable local food. This was the intro class to a whole certificate on this sort of general topic. And then maybe 6 years ago, it got brought into the regular college course stream as a gen ed. So here we are. I got into this a long time ago in an undergraduate course, started learning about local food, got really interested in it, focused my master's research on policy related to sustainable agriculture and essentially resolving hunger in developing countries. And then after way too long in school and having only skills related to writing papers, I decided that I should maybe branch out a little bit, as well as I was kind of a little bit done with academia at that point. So I spent some time in a program where I was learning about growing food and working on a farm. It was actually a school program, so it was like a 9-month schooling where you delve into like how to do it. So that was also after working with farmers and feeling a bit disconnected on how to sort of speak their language.
Right.
I felt I needed a little bit more hands-on experience. It was also a bit like, throughout all this, you kind of that like, I want to do my own thing, right? And I had no skills to do that. So part of it was just wanting to learn that. And now I live on an 11-acre piece of land out near Peterborough. My partner and I, we both work full time. We have little kids, so we don't do as much farming as we originally planned when we came out here. But we grow food and have fruit trees and constantly trying to make the land a little bit better.
Nice. So. Cool. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about the benefits of a sustainable food system and like, what does that even mean? First of all, why don't we start there? What is a sustainable food system? How would you kind of sum that up?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that it comes down to is that resources are limited, right? We live on a planet with finite resources. There is only so much land, so much water, so much so many trees, all of those sorts of things. And I think what we're seeing today with climate change and a loss of biodiversity is that we're not really taking into consideration that we need to use those resources in efficient ways and really help protect what we have. Because alongside that, we have a population that's growing. So we need to be more efficient with how we use those resources. So when it comes to what is a sustainable food system? It's one that helps reinvest into the land and helps sort of build the resources as opposed to deplete them, which is the system that we have been relying on, I think, now for a long time. Of course, there's always been lots of pockets of sustainability, as there still are today. But as a whole, it's not one that, when you look at, again, back to climate change, those are, they refer to those as externalities. They're things that don't get incorporated into the cost of food. So they don't get considered.
Right.
Same with transportation, just because something is, created on the other side of the world, if it's cheaper there, well, then that's better. And so we don't think about what that might be doing to that the land that's over there, or what energy it takes to get it over here.
Right.
Really the driving force is finances.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
much
So
it costs.
give me a specific example of that, the worst one that you know of, a food that comes from someplace in the world, some other place in the world that we can buy in our grocery store here in Canada.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to give you the worst one, but this was one that I used to, I did my graduate work in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And so, okay, this isn't the other side of the world, but this is just in terms of inefficiency. And this maybe breaks down some of the things that people actually think about our local food system as well. So I was working with farmers in Nova Scotia. We were talking about distribution and things like that. And so there were local apples that were being sold, that were being grown in Nova Scotia, being sold in Nova Scotia. Great, that looks really efficient. But they were actually, before being sold in Nova Scotia, they were shipped to Ontario for inspection. And then shipped back to Nova Scotia and sold as local Nova Scotian apples.
Right.
And it's true. Yes, they were grown in Nova Scotia,
Right.
but like that somehow was more efficient to ship apples, which are super heavy too and big, all the way to Ontario, because whatever inspection agency was based there. So, I don't know.
That's ridiculous.
And it's, I think this highlights the difficulty of making good choices as well, because, you look at, say, a local Nova Scotian person looks at that apple and they can see, maybe it's got a label from a local farm. They're like, yeah, that's just down the road.
Right.
But how many people know that apple actually got shipped, and it actually would have been more efficient to buy an Ontario apple that didn't have to travel both directions.
Right.
And
so ironic.
Yeah, it's just, I think this is the complexity of the system, and it's really challenging, and it can be overwhelming, especially, part of me has had a hesitancy to sharing that story, because, it overwhelms people when they hear things like that, and they're like, how am I supposed to sort that out? Right.
And then they just give up. Right.
And they give up. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and I get that, because it is complicated. So it's,
I run into that with nutrition all the time too, because I'm a holistic nutritionist. So just do what you can do and take little steps, right?
Yeah,
so, and if you don't know about the apples being shipped, then you can't do anything about it. That's fine. But now
exactly.
To alleviate your own guilt on that and just do your best. But I'm often, when I shop now after taking the course, I really think about this stuff. And to be honest, I thought I was doing pretty well with eating close to home and, shopping sustainably. I have friendships and partnerships with local organic farmers, and there's a food store out in Verona, which isn't very far from where I live, and she's a local farmer that lives 5 minutes down the road from me, and I used to buy a side of beef from her every year. And so I was doing all of that. But what I didn't realize was, because I try to eat organic food a lot of the time, but I was relying on a lot of organic produce shipped from California.
Yeah.
So because there's just not, especially in the grocery store, it's getting better now, especially places like Farm Boy, where they're trying to bring in more local organic stuff. But to do organic, most of the time I was buying stuff from California. And by the same token with the apples, okay, now it's been in storage. For how long has it, since it's been harvested, now it's been sitting somewhere in a warehouse, on a truck, and the nutrient, quality goes down with every day after harvest, right? In some cases, it might increase a little bit with ripening of certain nutrients, but in general, we're losing nutrients, the longer it takes for us to eat it. So that was important for me to recognize, okay, maybe sometimes it would be smarter for me to buy the grown in Ontario, non-organic, than it would to buy the organic shipped from California. Or sometimes even Mexico. And I've always warned clients about buying organic stuff from Mexico, because the standards, I don't know what their standards are for organic.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into that, but if you can buy a law degree in Mexico, so I don't know if you can, if you can buy an organic certification. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I haven't looked specifically into their regulations
Right.
or
So
how
when,
they verify even that the farmers are following the rules that
right.
exist.
So
So
yeah. So that's one of the things that changed for me is I will look more. And the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, they print a list every year of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 or something of the foods
yeah.
that are most important to buy organic, and
Mhm,
the ones that probably don't matter as much.
mhm,
So if it's on that list of the ones that don't matter as much and I can get it locally,
mhm.
now I'm going to do that instead of buying organic that's been shipped from California.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely a good approach. And like you said, if you're making those relationships with the farmer down the road, then you can have that conversation because a lot of farmers don't get organic
Right.
certification. That doesn't mean that they're doing, they're putting terrible chemicals on their food, right?
Exactly.
Like it doesn't, it might just mean that it's too much paperwork for them, or maybe they use one thing that isn't on the organic list. I mean, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's lots of
Right.
flawed pieces of the
Oh,
organic system, even
yeah, I
in
agree.
Canada, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's a solid answer to that. I don't think it means don't support it either, because a lot of people take that to mean that you shouldn't even buy organic,
Right.
and that system is so flawed. So, I think the system is still sorting out how to navigate this and how to
Yeah.
best could provide consumers with the opportunity to make an informed choice.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's not cut and dried, and I wouldn't say always 100% organic. I would rather have that relationship with the person that
Yeah.
grew my food
Yeah.
and know what they use, and if they're feeding it to their family, that's a pretty good validation for me that it's high quality food.
Yeah, and I mean, when we're talking about sustainability, we're not just talking about health, right? We're also talking
Yeah.
about economics. So when you
Yeah.
buy from your local farmer down the road, 100% of the money that you buy is going back to that farmer,
Right.
versus when you're buying from California or Mexico or something like that, there are so many people into like that get that food from California to your house,
Yeah.
between transportation and packaging and then the resale of it. So at the
Right.
grocery store, the distribution, all of it, right? So
Yeah.
the end result that goes to that farmer is not very much, versus again, sustainability. We want sustainability of our system,
Yeah.
and I think COVID has really brought this to light,
Yeah.
because when we saw the distribution challenges and we were walking around the grocery store, and there were things that were totally sold out, like you couldn't buy
Just couldn't get
whatever.
it. Yeah.
uh, I mean, and there, it wasn't just it was I mean, the news media really focused on the toilet paper and
Right.
that kind of stuff, but if you looked around the vegetable section as well, there were big gaps.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know someone personally who works for Loblaws at the level of, coordinating food getting to all of the centers across Ontario. And there were some challenges. It didn't really hit the media, but I mean, we could see it in the grocery store. There
Yeah.
was like huge gaps. And so why was that? Well, it was because of COVID making things more difficult with the transportation, right? It
Right.
wasn't that the food didn't exist.
Right.
It wasn't that the grocery store wasn't operating. It was that the ability to get it from A to B was the challenge, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
when you support someone down the road, and you give them enough money to like have an income and continue to exist,
Yeah.
which is often the problem in Canada, right? Is that a
Yeah.
lot of farmers aren't making enough income to be able to continue to
Yeah.
operate. And the other
Exactly.
part of that is that the aging population of farmers in Canada, they're
Right.
all getting older, and because there's so little money in it, that people don't want to get into it, right? Because it's
Right.
not I mean, I even found myself, like, we moved to this 11-acre piece of land, and we didn't necessarily have a plan to be farmers, but we were toying with the idea of, like, I don't know, maybe doing something that would generate some income. And it's just been too hard to justify investing into that,
Right.
when we have full-time jobs that
Yeah.
pay a
Yeah, and
certain
it's not
wage,
easy work either.
and it's not easy work. Exactly. So, I mean, maybe we'll get there. Again, our issue is that we have small kids on top
Right.
of all these things.
Yeah.
So it
You need
makes
them to
it
get big
difficult
enough
to
to
go.
help.
Yeah. Yeah. Or to just play on their own. Even that would be,
Yeah.
I'd take that.
Yeah. Okay,
uh,
so I think we covered the benefits of the sustainable food system for the economy a little bit,
yep.
local economy, right? For health,
Yep.
and for the environment, as far as transportation. Is there any other points that you wanted to make about those benefits for that sustainable food system?
Um, no, I think that
We
was all.
covered that. Okay, so let's talk about how. How do we do that? So we talked a little bit about it, like looking at where your food comes from,
Yeah.
making an arrangement with a local farmer. What other things would you suggest for people, especially if we're talking about the student population, that are maybe living on their own for the first time, or maybe they're in residence?
Mhm.
Obviously, this year with COVID, a lot of them are still living at home, so they don't maybe even have control of their shopping habits. But if they can put some bugs in ears about things, so how would you recommend someone starts, eating more sustainably?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways. I mean, one thing with institutions, I think that a lot of institutions are starting to support more local farms as well in terms of the food that they buy and make into the food that's sold on campus. So, I mean, obviously that's a bit less relevant during COVID when most people are not going to campus nearly as much, if at
Right,
all.
right.
But I mean, like you said, there are still people in residence, so they're having to eat, and COVID isn't going to last forever. So I think that we can help put pressure on our institutions to support those local systems more.
Yeah,
Um, Definitely. And that doesn't really cost anyone anything, right? To put that effort in. But, sometimes institutions need to know that that's important to the local population, the student population.
yeah,
So there's no cost to that. The
right.
time, yes, but no cost. And then, of course, but yes, making a relationship with your local farmer is amazing. We can't always do that, and not directly as well. But you could. There are popping by a local farmers market. We were chatting earlier about the opportunities that have come through COVID to actually buying online,
Yeah,
pre-purchasing, and then you could either pick up, or even in some areas there's delivery. Get it delivered right to your door, order online from your local farmer or from your local farmers market, where they
right.
sort of bring all the products together from the different members. There's lots of businesses like that are popping up, especially from COVID. So I think it's important to try and tap into that and pay
Yeah,
attention, because things are really changing right now. And I think this is like, if COVID has brought anything positive, I think some of these things are going to stick around afterwards, because I think it's shown farmers that they can, I mean, not all, this doesn't speak to all farmers, but the idea that farmers are not tech savvy, and
right.
all of that. I mean, I think there has been an element of that being true,
Sure.
um, but I think that some of them have like been able to step over that hurdle, or there's been mechanisms in place to help incorporate those farmers into the
Yeah,
systems, whatever that takes. So there's definitely that, and then there's lots of grocery stores supporting local as well. So even if you can't, I mean, even if you go to No Frills, or you go
yeah,
to Sobeys or whatever it is, if you look around, and if you're choosing apples, there's local apples there, or there's ones that are brought in from far away. So even just choosing the more local varieties can often, make an impact. And it doesn't feel like it in the moment, but I always like to reference that, as every time we make a choice, we're essentially putting a vote for what
yeah.
system we want to see.
Voting with your
And
wallet is
so,
the way I
yeah,
call it. Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, people often say, well, I'm spending so little on the system, but there is really a collective movement towards this. And so a lot of farmers, are doing a lot better because of the local food movement
yeah.
that has been around now for a long time, but is growing and growing. So it is it does make an impact. So don't tell
Right.
yourself that it
Yeah.
doesn't.
And recognizing too that you might, so if you're at the grocery store and there are local apples and there are apples shipped from someplace far away, it's quite possible and maybe even probable that the ones shipped from far away are cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so then it comes down to, okay, am I going to choose to pay more
Yeah.
for the local to vote for the local?
Yeah.
Recognize that the system that brought those cheaper apples here is broken and it's doing much more damage. We're paying for that in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what the externalities that I was mentioning before, that's sort of the economic term to it, is that it doesn't, these costs, because they are costs, but they don't get factored into the price of the apple. But again, I think that, eventually we're probably going to see a change in that, because as governments step up to try to lessen the impacts of climate change, that this is the way that they're doing it, is they're taxing things that are more expensive to the overall environment, right? In order to help encourage people to make choices that are more sustainable,
Right.
So that the apple coming from far away is more expensive, and it reflects that there's all these extra costs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but I think there are other ways too, to be able to gain impacts from this. I mean, I think there's a lot of local food out there that even goes to waste just because the systems of distribution aren't set up.
Right.
So at the end of the season, I really, like, if you're interested and you don't have a lot of funds, I think there's still a lot of opportunity to be able to access local food. I mean, it's a little bit too late now, but about a month ago, I live in the country and I'm driving around and I see all sorts of, again, we keep talking about apples, but I see all sorts of apple trees on the side of the road. There's even like in areas like on land that no one owns, and it's like municipal owned land, and there's a huge apple tree filled with apples and they're falling to the ground and no one's collecting them, right? So sometimes it's about being in tune with what's available and then seeking out the right sources. So the end of the growing season is that's when the harvest comes in. And so if you can stock up at the end of the season, if you have a freezer, often farmers are practically giving away food at that point. Tomatoes,
so
peppers,
much.
and they can actually be quite inexpensive at that point, even compared to the local grocery store. It's sometimes even cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think people often disregard, oh, it's local, it's a farmer's market, it is just thereby more expensive, but it's not always the case. But I do recognize that these sorts of things take a lot of time. That is a huge factor, and people feel limited by their finances, which is often very legitimately a limiting factor.
And I like to just point out that it's an investment. There's an investment in time, there's an investment in money, but that investment has a pretty big return as far as the impact.
Yeah, definitely.
So the health impact is just how you feel in general, the environmental impact, the overall economic impact. So this is something that we can do to make a difference, right? To invest some time and money in the bigger picture of all of us moving towards a more sustainable environment.
And even if you just make a friend who's growing food, even at a community garden, even if you're not the one growing it, people often have extra. I mean, one zucchini plant makes way more zucchini than any one person can eat. One zucchini plant.
Right.
So if you just have a friend that has a zucchini plant, like, you could probably tap into that.
You could probably have one person grows a tomato plant, one person grows a zucchini plant, one person grows, a cucumber, and you're set. Someone grows some lettuce.
It really, sure that this isn't going to feed a whole family for the whole year, but these little things do make a difference. And rather than, like, if that zucchini is not getting eaten, it's probably going in the compost, right? Or or getting fed to like pigs or something, which I mean,
Yeah.
pigs need to eat too, but they could eat other things
Sure.
that,
Yeah.
and that zucchini, yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
Even
edible
if,
food for humans. If we can get that distributed, I mean, we have such a problem with that food distribution of
yeah,
people in the world being hungry,
yeah,
people even in our local environment being
yeah,
hungry. And it's not because there isn't enough food, at least
yeah.
from that perspective, it's more of a distribution problem.
Yeah, definitely. And there's even like, I mean, again, because I don't live in Kingston, I'm not as familiar with all of the opportunities there. But I mean, through the different places I've lived in Nova Scotia, in Toronto, in British Columbia, in Peterborough, I've always seen different gleaning organizations. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term or if everyone would be, but where basically what they do is they try to connect. So gleaning is about, about essentially harvesting unharvested food.
Okay, yeah, that's what I
And
thought. Yeah,
so organizations that are usually volunteer run,
yeah,
and they try to make relationships with different people who have food growing, whether or not it's like a pear tree that
right.
they can't possibly eat all the pears off of one tree because they're all ripe at the same time.
Yeah,
And so often what will happen is you get a call out. I think I'm on the Facebook group for the local one here. And I mean, again, I have my own land, so I don't necessarily tap into it, but I like to just pay attention to what's going on. And it's like, okay, there's a whole field of broccoli that is too small and can't go to market. And so everybody jumps on a bus and goes to this broccoli farm. And I think there's some kind of mechanism for how much each person gets to keep, how much
yeah,
gets donated to the food bank.
right.
I mean, each organization has their own setup of how they do it. But
Yeah,
again, this is free.
yeah,
It's you don't even have to develop the relationship. All you have to do is pay attention to that one source, and then you can tap into that. And
yeah, that's great.
so it's not so much about the money,
Yeah, yeah. I
rather
have a friend
than,
that does that in Ottawa. She goes and picks pears and apples just in someone's backyard, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's dropping fruit and it's going to go to waste if someone doesn't pick it.
totally,
So there's
totally.
volunteers that go pick that and then donate it to the food bank and keep some themselves.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
sometimes
it's a great
you
initiative.
can even create your own relationships. When I used to live in Toronto, I randomly found I might have been searching for it because I was that focused on
Yeah.
this at the time. I don't have that much time anymore. But I knew it was like grape harvesting season and I wanted to make grape juice. And so I started looking on Kijiji for someone. I'm like, it's
Right.
Toronto, right? So
Yeah.
everything happens in Toronto.
Right.
And so I found someone who had posted on
Wow.
Kijiji that had too many grapes and couldn't
Wow.
harvest them in their backyard, just like in some little neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so me and a friend, we didn't even have a car. We rented a car because the amount of grapes we were getting was worth it for
Right.
like it
Wow.
was probably one of those car share programs where you just do a couple hours or whatever. So we drove over there, collected like probably 4 bushels of grapes out of
Wow.
this backyard, and then processed it into grape juice and grape jelly and
Nice.
all the things. I will say some of it went rotten, but we tried very hard
Right.
to
Right.
do it all. So, and I think he did ask for like $20 or something like
Right.
that. But I mean,
Worth it.
anyway, they were going to go bad in his
Right.
backyard because he didn't want them. I think his grandparent, like it was like the
Yeah.
house was like his grandparents, they had, and it was covering a trellis, so he didn't want to cut them down because it was providing shade in the summer.
Right.
um, but then once the grapes start going ripe, they're falling down, or it's attracting wasps and things like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
So
Of course. Yeah.
anyway, I guess the whole point of that long drawn out way of saying this point is that there's really innovative ways to
Yep.
get local food. And so I think that especially for students, where students are often on a limited budget, it can actually work out okay if you can sort of focus on creating a situation
Right.
that isn't limited by finances.
Right. And there's tons of community gardens in Kingston too.
Yeah, of course. Growing your own food is another great option. And I mean, yes, community gardens are often the go-to, but I also like to bring it back to like you could grow your own sprouts in your
Yeah.
apartment. that has no sun. You don't
Right.
even need sun for sprouts.
Right.
So you just need a spot on your counter to hold a jar, or even in your cupboard, because it could be in your cupboard. You might forget about it in your cupboard, but I would put it on your counter just so you don't forget.
Right.
They need to have water every day, but
Yeah.
you can grow sprouts.
Yeah,
And
that's super easy. And you can buy sprout seeds. Grocery stores sell them, health food
so,
stores sell them. You just throw them in
so
a
cheap.
jar, rinse them
Yeah,
off.
a little piece, totally. A little piece of what's that cloth? The cloth over top.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
and
even just mesh. Like I've just used
yeah,
just a piece of mesh from a lemon bag or something, like
yeah.
anything like that that you can use to strain the water out.
Totally. You could probably even use a coffee filter if you really
Sure.
wanted.
Yeah.
I have not tried that, but
Super
anyway.
easy. And there are tons of nutrition in sprouts too.
Exactly, exactly. So there's so many different ways, and it's just about sorting out what works for your situation.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Okay. I think we've covered our main points here: growing our own
yeah,
food, where to shop, kind of what to look for, that whole local food movement. I just wanted to talk. This is the textbook from the course that you teach, Locavore. You
yeah,
still like this textbook? Is there another
yeah.
one that you like?
I do like that textbook. I mean, to be honest, every year I'm like, oh, because it's getting a little bit older. It's from 2010, if I'm
Yeah,
not
but it's still good.
mistaken. But so I mean, I've reached out to so many publishers to try and find a new textbook just because I want something with a bit more local, or sorry, recent data in it.
Right.
But honestly, that book is so good.
Yeah.
It's written, it's really accessible. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not written like a boring textbook. It's also very affordable. I like
Yeah.
that.
It's
And
Canadian.
it's Canadian, exactly. So I have yet to be able to find one that I feel like can replace that textbook.
Yeah.
So I still recommend it. I think it's
Yeah.
great. I think
I thought it was
it's
good too.
inspiring too,
Yeah.
but it really does highlight the problems in the food system as well.
Yeah. I liked it a lot.
Mhm.
This is a book that that I've recently purchased and supported. This is two people from the US, Rob Wolf, who's a nutrition expert, kind of paleo keto guy, actually, that I learned a lot about nutrition from him. He's a CrossFit nutrition guy originally. And Diana Rogers, who's a registered dietitian and also an organic farmer.
Okay, I haven't read it.
So it's pretty new. And they also have a documentary that will be, it's available now for viewing. I'm not sure where you can view it. It's not on Netflix. I'd have to look and see which platforms have it. But if someone wants to Google that, I'm sure you can. And the basis behind the book and the documentary is about a regenerative, sustainable food system, and how it's not necessarily meat that's bad for us. It's how we're raising our meat. It's how we're farming our meat. So and a lot of science, like really science-based, they're talking about the regenerative, sustainable food systems when these things are in place in parts of the world, and showing how beneficial they can be, like just having plots for grazing and then moving cattle or livestock from one plot to another to allow that grass to regenerate, so they're not grazing on a huge, and eating all that grass and making it barren. And so and actually they're showing that cattle can be not just carbon neutral, carbon negative. So they can trap carbon. So this whole idea that cattle are so bad for the planet, they're really challenging that with some solid science. So if anyone's interested in diving into that topic, which is a huge topic right now, I'd really recommend looking at Sacred Cow. So anything you want to just close with or add on eating sustainably, or how to make it work, or where to start? Maybe one tip on where to start.
One tip on where to start. I mean, maybe just like picking one thing for your, like one change, right? So what's one food that is in season right now, and that you could support. So I mean, lots of squash, buy one squash from the grocery store that is nearby, or from a local farmer, pick it up at a farm stand, or some apple cider. There's lots of apple cider right now, rather than buying juice, so maybe just try and make one substitution this week. Learn and maybe try and make it new, right? So pick somewhere new that isn't too far out of your way.
Yeah,
and
that's a
can
good idea.
introduce you to something.
Yeah. So
Just
we're recording this. I'll just mention this. We're recording this early November. So by the time this actually airs, it could
okay.
be December.
Okay.
So it's trickier through those winter months, obviously, to eat local. I mean, we live in Canada, so not
Yeah.
much is growing in that season.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still get Ontario potatoes, like the root vegetables, right? Like you can
Totally.
still find organic carrots, organic
Yeah.
beet, or not organic, sorry, local beets, local carrots, local potatoes, probably into December, you think?
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
There are actually winter CSAs that
Oh,
exist that
that's right.
only offer winter, like they grow food all summer and don't sell it, and they
Yeah.
store it in order to sell it in the winter when it's not
Yeah.
as accessible. There are so many options. When I first started teaching the Field to Fork course before it was part of the regular college diploma program, and it was just the continuing ed program, it was also online, and it tended to attract people from across the country. Even there were people in the States and occasionally in Europe that would take the course. And so, I will say I actually learned a lot about food systems all across, mostly it was across Canada, but so one of the projects that I had early on, as opposed to an essay, was I had students try and eat 100% local
Mm.
for a week. It was a big task.
Yeah.
I let them have 5 things that they, sometimes oil or coffee or chocolate, whatever your need is. They can define that themselves. So anyway, but then do 100% local. So I had a student who was in the Yukon, and it was winter, and she was like, she's like, I want to do this. Like, do you think I could? And I was like, try it, right? Like, try. And so it was actually so fascinating to read her report, because she ended up bartering for local meat. Like, I think she was eating seal meat and caribou and a whole bunch of stuff. And so, also when it comes to local in the winter, like if you do eat meat, that is an option for, more focusing your diet locally, because meat is often frozen. And so I think I actually really used to enjoy it. I think that assignment, I had to take it out once just because it's a bit too much for, I think, regular college students who have a way bigger course load than the students that I had from the continuing ed. But it was a really fascinating project that opened up people's eyes to what was available locally. Like there's local flour, there's local quinoa, in Ontario, there's local oil. You can get all of these things local. So we always tend to limit ourselves by thinking about vegetables not being available, but also apples last all winter. They're still they're put into storage. People have figured out how to keep those fruits all year round. So, when you're buying apples in June, they're not ready yet on the trees. So those are apples from the previous year. And so
people don't understand that too. Yeah. Like what's in season in a certain time of the year. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's way more possible, and just doing a bit of research really gets you a lot further ahead in terms of realizing what's possible for your area, and not just Kingston as a whole, but your community within that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate the chat. I hope some people get some good pointers from that. So if you want to follow SA Voice Podcast, you can do that on YouTube, Instagram, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all the places that you find podcasts. You can follow along for more great content. So thanks, Jessica, and have a great day.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.